incorporated into the aesthetic space. And I talk a bit in the interview with Chad, Collins, and Reggie Gatewood, who are the founders, the CEO and president of MD Pharma. And I will talk to you about them in a minute, but I talked to them a bit about my experience. And I heard about this company and these guys through a colleague of mine in the industry who's a distributor for them. And he was kind of just saying, this is a really great product and my clients are really loving it. I think it's something you should introduce to help your practices differentiate themselves from their competitors. And he didn't know that I had, in fact, an extensive experience with building a wellness division for a plastic surgeon when I was a profit share partner and ran my practice a couple of years ago. And we hired an anesthesiologist to launch a wellness division and incorporated diet plans, nutrition supplements, IV infusion, and CBD, all as part of clinical protocol perioperatively. And then even on the non-surgical side, we started seeing how it was really impacting patients in their recovery process clinically, but also they became kind of into the whole way that they felt being on the CBD in a state of more homeostasis, so to speak. They felt revitalized. They looked forward to coming in to get an IV infusion while they were getting Botox or a filler. And it was really just another gateway to open up for them to refer. Even we had a lot of women who'd bring their husbands in that would get IV infusions while they were having treatments done. And then really the CBD just kind of grew itself in the practice. So I had done some research looking into what it would look like to formulate CBD for the aesthetic space, because this was a gap that I had seen. But it wasn't something that I was really prepared to obviously start a company over. I just wanted to see if there was good quality product out there, because I know CBD is available everywhere. And so when I stumbled upon this company, I really thought they were onto something special. So I have this interview you guys will listen to here shortly with the founders of MD Pharma, who have formulated and really leveraged physician advisorship and highest quality manufacturing to bring forward a clinical CBD product that is manufactured in a facility that only manufactures pharmaceutical grade products. So the process for which the stuff that they're putting out is regulated, it's just a whole different ballgame than what they'll call the Wild West of CBD out there. And so Reggie, he comes from he launched Sculptor Aesthetics. He was head of sales at Dermic. He has led businesses and teams in biotech. And Chad, he's the CEO, who is very visionary, dynamic healthcare executive who I happen to know plenty of people who know him and have worked for him when he really ran a multi-million-dollar brands with Galderma, big pharma, Sanofi, Stryker, plus a successful private healthcare startup. And he's got all of his degrees, went to Harvard and Cornell and has an MBA. And anyway, I think these guys are just super, super brilliant. They have done their homework in terms of creating a product that I feel comfortable really standing behind and endorsing. And so I want you to listen to this if you are at all interested in introducing a wellness component to your practice. Maybe you have or haven't thought about CBD, but the reality is 1 in 7 people are already on CBD. So your patients may enjoy and appreciate having a gateway to opening up this conversation with them about wellness and their overall well-being as your patient, establishing trust and rapport. And this company's really built a strong retail process. You'll hear more about it in this interview. But anyway, stick around to the end, or FF if you're ready to just run with it. I am offering, MD Pharma is sponsoring 30-minute strategy call with me or my team, and also a training on proprietary offers and bundling to, put a strategy in place to incorporate CBD into some of your holiday packages and bundles. So I would love to hear your feedback on this. So without further ado, here is my interview with MD Pharma. Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaeli Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. All right. Hello, and welcome. We are getting our technical issues all sorted out, and I want to start right on time because this is such a highly anticipated podcast interview that I get to do today in a live stream. And I want to get started right away because I know so many of you are standing in line at the polls and you have just a limited amount of time to get a lot of information. So first of all, I want to welcome my special guests today. I have Chad Collins here and I have Reggie, and they are from MD Pharma. I want you to give an introduction about who you are and what your company is. But first, I want to give a little bit of insight as to why I asked you to come on to my podcast, our podcast, The Fierce Factor, and why so many of my clients were excited and asking me about what is this whole idea around integrating wellness medicine and CBD into my aesthetic practice. And I think going back a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was running a practice, and it was a very novel thing for us to bring in an anesthesiologist to administer a wellness practice in accordance with our plastic surgery practice preoperatively and postoperatively. We started kind of just integrating this whole idea of incorporating nutrition beforehand to help with recovery process. And then he got really excited about the idea of CBD to help kind of curb opioid addiction. And that was something just we had really was running rampant is in Orange County still, but obviously all over the place in terms of pain management. And then he started to see the other ways clinically that these patients were being impacted by CBD. And so I was really excited about it. I started to do some of my own research. I would be like sitting out at the baseball field and like, hey, anybody got any pain? And the moms were all like rubbing it all over themselves. But when I started to, bring that back to my real business on the consulting side, I was getting a lot of kickback from practices about like, why don't I just go to the guy on the street or drive through the pot house, or can I get some gummies with that? It was just kind of, it didn't really have like a clinical significance. And so our good friend Brandon, who's a distributor of your guys' products, reached out to me and said, Kaeli, I really think you should hear these guys out and talk to them. And then I got to know the two of you. And you both have a reputation that precedes you in our industry. So I want you to tell our listeners, first of all, a little bit about where you come from, your background, and a little bit about this transition from where you were in a whole different kind of aspect of servicing our industry on the clinical side to launching your business. So maybe Chad, let's start with you, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, Kaeli, thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it. It is a hot topic without question. And so Reggie and I are really honored to be here with you today and share a little bit on our background and where we're headed with MD Pharma. So as far as background, in over 20 years in the pharmaceutical and medical device space, I've been an executive in companies like Sanofi, Stryker, Galderma, to name a few, and have had an opportunity to build multi-billion-dollar brands and big divisions for companies. But this was a space that I saw was an opportunity to really build something special around the healthcare community. And in a market that's exploding right now. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But Reg?
Yeah, similar track. So Chad and I go back quite a few years, 20 plus years, working for one of those big companies. I can't say better than Chad. Our experience has led us to this point. And I know we'll talk a little bit about the why behind what we're doing. But we strongly believe in it. We see a need in the market. We see high potential in the market. We see an opportunity to help healthcare providers get into a conversation that's really a big conversation right now.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I have to tell you, as we were posting and promoting this last night, a former employee of one of yours reached out to me and said, wow, you're having them on your podcast. That's amazing. It was like starting to get a little bit nervous,
We had a good fortune to be around great people. So
yeah, well, your reputation precedes you. And I think more to the point, first of all, I think just the leadership that you brought into this company, but moreover that I don't think you stepped into this whole, Reggie mentioned like now of timing. I'm thinking about us being in the midst of a pandemic. And, for me, and the reason why I started this podcast, which is called The Fierce Factor, is really about leaning into stories of resilience and stories of people who have done incredible things in the midst of adversity. And there are a lot of people that are dealing with wellness, just kind of things going on in their life right now, but also from your story, from the business leadership side, really seeing an opportunity and capitalizing on it and doing it in the middle of a time period when probably a lot of people didn't think that you would be able to do it. And so I want to talk to that, holistically. I want to get into the CBD piece of it because I think it's just so interesting and fascinating. But I did get some questions, coming into this, moreover from that holistic standpoint of like, how really applicable is this wellness conversation in my aesthetic practice? And for me, I can certainly draw on the experience that I had, and that really it started with just doing IV infusion therapy. And then all of a sudden we're creating these proprietary bundled procedures where people are coming in like, I can get Botox and I can get an IV. And then when I leave, I don't just get skincare, but I get like a CBD cream that's going to help with inflammation. And it was such a natural conversation because we were talking to people as people and not just as like inject you. I work with high level providers who think of their patients more holistically. And so I think in terms of the integration of wellness, I want to talk about that in general and how you've seen that transitioning from these big pharma companies and working on like the derm side, and obviously with the different aesthetic providers too that you have, Reggie, with Sculptura and whatnot, but coming into the wellness space. And then why was it that you guys said, this is the product that we need to bring as kind of like the hook for these practices? Like, what was it about the CBD?
Well, what's interesting for us, Reggie and I, we work one of the largest pharma companies in the world. It really actually goes back over a decade back. We started learning about the endocannabinoid system, which is where CBD works. It works on the CB1 and CB2 receptor sites. And so we started to understand, because we were actually starting to prep the market with the understanding of that every person has an endocannabinoid system and what can it do and what does it relay when it comes to whole wellness. And that's why you see the pharma industry will come here pretty significantly, because the utility of a CBD, how it works in the body. So when you say wellness, some of the main things that kind of fall under that may be pain, some of it chronic, some of it acute, inflammation, whether that's chronic and acute, but also anxiety and sleep and food and things. And you talked about COVID.
Yeah.
All of that has actually been just accelerated around that. And then you couple that with patients and consumers really want something more natural than just a prescription, right? And so we looked at an opportunity because there's the Wild West retail setting of CBD out there right now.
Yeah.
The reason it's the Wild West is all the issues in the supply chain. You've got too many people involved with supply chain for a lot of the retail brands that are out there. And that dilutes the product, or it's not actually what's in the bottle. And there's a lot of issues. And so Reggie and I recognized, could we bring to market something really unique that is highly clinical, pure, potent, effective, but also very safe and clean, that's geared towards the healthcare provider?
Yeah. So you brought up a word that we hear all the time, Kaeli. We hear wellness a lot. The reason why CBD, so ours especially, we're proud of because of the quality, and we can talk to that as well, but it needs to be high quality. And if it is, you're affecting the endocannabinoid system. So a decade ago, Chad and I were helping to prep the market for products that were coming out into the space. And that's beginning to happen now. 390 patents have been opened by Big Pharma to come here. Okay. And usually the leading indicator is when you start educating healthcare providers and patients about this is what this affects, this is how it can affect you. And it affects homeostasis. It's as simple as that. It's just balance. So when you think of wellness, you brought up a really good point earlier. People don't just go to a primary care provider anymore. If they go to a licensed healthcare provider that they can trust and talk to, then the wellness conversations, especially these days, especially today, right? Literally today, things like stress and anxiety and sleep and all of those things that we won't make claims around, but healthcare providers will base it off of a conversation they're having with their patients and make it real.
If I could add one thing specific to aesthetic practices, one of the things, because Reggie and I have been in that space for several years and have seen it up close, and we've seen the boom where a lot of folks have got into the aesthetic practice world. And the reason they have is because patients are looking for that, right? So they're looking for opportunities to enhance their livelihood in some way, right? Whether it's the look or feel good, et cetera. So when you couple the wellness that they're looking for, the explosion of that area of practice right now, the fact is those patients, they trust their provider. That's why they keep going back for those procedures. They trust you. Our message to your audience would be your patients trust you as a healthcare provider because you've given them something of quality.
That's right.
Right. And so now you have an opportunity to add in another revenue stream into your practice, of which those same patients may already be going to a store shelf or online and getting something that's inferior when it comes to cleanliness and just being a superior type of clinical CBD. You can really tie those two things together in an aesthetic practice.
For sure.
Right. I was just recently on a panel for a conference, and my talk was about team building and leadership. And I started getting questions because the panelists I was on the panel with were practitioners who were running really integrative, multidisciplinary practices, one of them being a prominent plastic surgeon out of Texas. And he said, the reality is we have patients that are coming in feeling tired, feeling bad, feeling not quite up to the way that they should feel. And they want to look better because they're feeling bad. And so for him, there wasn't even a question. It was, if you don't subscribe to my protocol on our supplements, on if it's MD Pharma CBD, if it's a supplementation product for vitamins, nutrition, a diet plan, he said, if you don't subscribe to this, then you're not a patient of ours. Like, this is an absolute requirement of ours. And I think this is where this business conversation came in. And I was getting a lot of questions about, well, how do you integrate these all together? And will you turn patients away? And in fact, it's the opposite that we're seeing. It's patients that are, to your point, coming to a provider who they trust, is being recommended a solution to a problem that they have that they may felt like they weren't able to talk about before. Yeah. And it's not only like, I'm going to want to get into the business side with you guys, because that's really what fascinates me. And I think more my specialty than the clinical side. But I think if we can look at addressing patients and their core needs and problems, and I think we teach this from a marketing and branding standpoint anyway, we're going to really establish better rapport, and patients are going to put their skin in the game. They're going to be a partner with you on the clinical journey. And that's really what a lot of these practitioners who have already implemented wellness into their aesthetic practice are saying to me. Do you find the same thing?
Spot on. So everything we do with this product and with our approach is based on trust. And what you're talking about is hovering around the importance of trust between a healthcare provider and a patient who implicitly trusts them with everything, with their body, with their health, right?
Right.
So for us, what we realized was, having seen a lot of the numbers even prior to now, we know that this space is growing and it's going to be huge. But here's the issue. 1 in 7 Americans are already taking some kind of CBD. So there it is. It's the hardcore reality. So some healthcare providers look at us and say, well, it's something else I'll bring in, I'll have to bring up. And we're like, interestingly, they'll probably bring it up to you before you do with them. And that was recently shown in an online survey with 500 dermatologists. Over 50% of patients had initiated a conversation about CBD. And so we're letting folks know, actually, it's already pretty ubiquitous as it is. It's out there. And all you have to do is just show your patients that you and your staff are knowledgeable enough to have the conversation about what, if it's right for them and in what way.
Do you think that was one of the biggest gaps for you guys? Or I'm sure nothing worthwhile comes easy. So I'm sure there were some hurdles, right? Getting the awareness out. And obviously this is still part of the process. Those numbers are interesting to me. I didn't realize 1 in 7 people are already. I know I told you guys I went the mom at the baseball field lathering in my CBD, but yeah, now I feel comfortable saying it since
you should.
I'm in good company apparently. Yeah, I'm not shy about that anymore. But what do you feel like, from your perspective, one of the biggest gaps or one of the things preventing docs from getting behind this whole concept of retailing CBD in their practice?
I think one of the things was there's confusion on what is hemp-derived CBD versus marijuana and maybe medical cannabis, and helping folks understand there's a distinct difference in the two. MD Pharma, we're focused on THC-free. In fact, that's guaranteed. So there's a lot of reasons behind that. But that also, since folks have started to understand the difference in the two, they become much more comfortable. Plus, I think when they do have patients that are literally asking them, hey, could I add a CBD to the regimen that you're already putting me on? Or could I potentially replace the synthetic pharmaceutical that I'm on today or anything like that because I have side effects, whatever reason? I think that has become a significant difference in healthcare providers starting to understand this is real. Reggie and I talk about all the time that CBD is not a fad. Intimately, we know it's not a fad when we know all the science going on and research going on at major institutions across the U.S., globally. And then if you look in the pharma industry right now has over 390 patents launched right now in the endocannabinoid system and CBD specifically. And so what they will do is they'll come to the market here in the next few years, 3 to 10 years, with different products that are going to be indicated for certain segments in the marketplace. Yeah. And so we knew that. So as clinicians start to understand it's not a fad and it works. Yeah. I will tell you, Reggie and I probably are the biggest skeptics of the pharmaceutical drugs in the marketplace. We know what the barriers are to get into the market, that sort of thing. But we also know anecdotally, personally, and family members of ours that have used CBD, high quality CBD, and seen tremendous things in their life change. Whether that was, we don't make claims, but there are folks that are seeing whether it's pain or sleep, anxiety, mood, those things. We've seen it firsthand, and we are probably the biggest skeptics a year plus ago before we did our due diligence and decided, you know what, this is a market that really deserves an opportunity to be in front of healthcare providers. And so now, 2 months ago, Kaeli, we actually started to launch product into the market. You can find our products coast to coast already across multiple specialties, which is another unique thing.
Yeah, so I want to come back to something that you both have hit on. So Chad, you mentioned education and learning the difference between, does this make me high versus what is CBD and hemp-derived CBD? So education was one of the gaps, and also quality. And so it's one thing to say, I took this, it made me feel great, I'm going to start a company around it. Well, that happens all the time, right? That's part of the problem in the retail Wild West. What we said is, look, think about where we've come from in pharma, helping to run big brands, educating patients, educating providers, and saying if that's a gap, that's a strength of ours. So let's create that foundation around education for the healthcare provider, because they need some coaching up on this too. So we're helping them with our process, with our certification. And then let's also help them help their patient, right? So that's the educational piece. And then the fact of the matter is, another reason why people are a little bit leery, and they should be, about what's out there in the Wild West, because JAMA recently published a study that said 70% of what's out there in the retail space with CBD is mislabeled. Now, that's something very near to Chad and I, because you can't walk out with a package insert and say, it's about 30% correct. It's good enough. It's close enough. It's got to be spot on. And that's what really fueled which product, which manufacturer, USDA certified, all of those things that truly separate and differentiate us while we're still going after the quality and the education piece.
Yeah, so it was funny. I didn't realize this was an issue until I worked with a client and we developed a private formulated skincare line, and we started looking into private formulation and also private label for different products that he was selling because we were building a brand. And I brought in a rep for a company that did supplements. And I was astounded by what really happens behind the scenes with these companies really producing these knockoff or all these diverted kind of products that are being bought in mass quantities by some wholesaler and then maybe diluted, or in each capsule, there's half of them and then half of them are like placebo capsules. I was literally blown away. And so I could definitely see how that could be a concern. And two, I think obviously this is innovative, but it's not, it used to be a topic people didn't want to talk about because it was so closely associated with like, oh, I'm going to go smoke a bowl and like use CBD. Like it's the same thing, but they're different. Obviously.
As my parents would say, okay, Chad, you're right. This is quite different.
Yeah. Right. No, I know. So I wanted to talk to just a couple points. I really want to talk about maybe an example or an experience that you guys have had with a provider in the aesthetic space who's seen some success by leveraging this whole wellness concept through your CBD to diversify their portfolio. But I want to mention too, because I'm going to want to segue into this piece kind of through the course of the rest of our conversation, differentiating the pharma side versus the retail product side. And so I think, Chad, there was something that you and I talked about on a conversation when I was doing some of my due diligence before today, learning about just the safety protocols that go into the manufacturing process of these products that you're bringing out, because I think that's important. So I know that I asked you too many questions in one, but one, can you take a step back to talk about what's going on kind of behind the scenes from the manufacturing piece, right? And then two, an example of how an aesthetic practice has leveraged this to really monetize their retail division or segment of their business.
Yeah, let me start with the aesthetic side for a moment, and then I'll let Reggie talk about kind of the science and the quality piece and how unique that is for MD Pharma. But I'll give you a great example. I don't know if I can use the name of the organization, but it's a large dermatology group that's both medical derm and aesthetics, and big aesthetic practice. So what I know what they do, where they've monetized this very well, is they've packaged it and bundled it into their procedures, different procedures. And in fact, they have some patients that say, I'm a little nervous, and they actually even start our clinical CBD, like an oral version of our CBD prior to a procedure or surgery. And then what they do is when they have follow-up, they always ask this question. This is where they've been really successful. They ask the question, well, you look like we went from point A to B really well, right? We reduced inflammation like we anticipated. But what else did you notice?
Simple question.
And 9 times out of 10, the patient has said, you know what? Actually, I feel good. I have less anxiety and I'm sleeping really well. So they want to continue. They say, can I order more? And that is happening. And so that to us kind of speaks to the whole wellness thing. So a patient may start for one reason, maybe packaged with a pre and post procedure, but then they want to stay on it because they're getting all this other wellness benefit from it. And the only place they can get it, actually, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, they can only get it from their clinician. Mm-hmm. You can't find this on Amazon. You can't find this on a store shelf somewhere. And that's a great thing. And that goes back to our promise around MD first, healthcare provider first.
Yeah. So when you're talking about examples like you just mentioned, there's a lot of them. And you don't get that result or that experience with all CBD because it's not all the same. And so we took painstakingly long time researching, geeking out, if you will, on all of, like you're talking about, when you dig in and you start talking about what you're going to do and your mission, your vision, all that stuff, and it's got to be the absolute best stuff, then you go to the ends of the earth all hours of the day to find it. And so what we do, so this is, for starters, Chad mentioned this earlier, it's all one supply chain. Okay. So the big problem with the stigma in CBD is that somebody who knows a guy does this part, and then there's an investor that wants in on this part, and then there's a farmer down the road that has the best stuff at this part. We're not doing that. We're saying, look, We're doing USDA certified organic, and we can put vegan on our bottles. We can do things that others can't do because it's the quality. And so how do you get that quality? Okay, well, you better third-party test every step of the way. You better third-party test the soil. You better third-party test the seed. You better third-party test the plant. And you better keep third-party testing that plant until you finally extract it. And the extraction better be the best in the world, second to none extraction. And then once you get that final product, you keep third-party testing it. And then you put the results of all of your third-party tests of whatever batch makes it in the bottle on all of your bottles. So they can QR code it, pull it up and say, oh, well, let's see exactly what's in this bottle and if it matches what's on the label. And for us, it is every single time. Because when you go with high quality processes and extraction and all the things we talked about, there's no surprises. And that's the problem with the 70% mislabeling issue, is that you've got people, I'm just being honest, you got people trying to flip a buck. Pharma's not going to do that. They're going to come here and put high standards and quality standards in place, and it's going to be a little more regulated, which we love. That's fine, because that's what patients deserve. But more importantly, great CBD really does work. And as Chad mentioned earlier, it's not a fad anymore. It's a fact. And so if you've got 5 out of the top 10 pharma companies coming to this space, they're not chasing rainbows and lollipops, right? There's science and there's data out there that they're following. So that's where we find ourselves, is elevating quality. It's almost the generic versus the brand.
Yeah, I was going to add that there's a reason. So pharmaceutical companies, and we know one very intimately for many, many years there, but they don't have hemp farms. So they have to source it from the highest quality manufacturers. And so that's what we have done. Our manufacturers, example, they don't do any retail. That's not the game they play. They want to be the highest quality. It is all about the science. And our product is produced in a CGMP facility, which is regulated by the FDA. And they've got a pharmaceutical license, which actually means our product is being produced in the same facility that can produce FDA-approved pharmaceuticals. And so that talks to the quality piece. There are no gaps. So I think healthcare providers, that's what they deserve. So in these aesthetic practices, they're doing high quality work that is very intricate, and they're really impacting patients in a number of ways. So they deserve to have the highest quality type of product produced to their patients, so their patients aren't running to Walmart or CVS or Walgreens or Amazon somewhere, not knowing what they're getting, right? So
well, I just think in a way, another avenue to fight commoditization around what we're doing in aesthetics. And we talk so often, I mean, I'm getting ready to host a series of 3 trainings on how to handle objections from price shoppers, right? Because your average Susie wants Botox. How much is Botox? How much is Botox? And that's a medical procedure, which leads to other medical procedures. And we need to be taking this seriously. And I think that having the tools within your practice to be able to talk about the complexity of having a medical procedure and why we have the resources to make sure that it's done properly here, including how we can take care of your, before and after, and your pain management, your sleep, all of the things, et cetera, I think it's just a critical conversation. I want to go back to, I think, Chad, you mentioned this question that, one of your big practices is having a lot of success with asking, when patients come back and they're asking, what else did you see? What else have you noticed? And they're like, my sleep, my this, my that, blah, 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 right? Like, what an important conversation to have. Now, as a devil's advocate, I'm a big practice. Maybe I, as the provider, am not the one who is constantly having those conversations about, let's say a plastic surgeon as an example. We're talking about your tummy tuck here. Like, I don't have the time, or really, it doesn't really lend itself into having the conversation about what kind of arnica are you going to use after? Deal with my staff, right? So, my clients are asking questions like, all right, Kaeli, but how do I know that my staff is going to be able to have this conversation? How have you guys addressed that?
Yeah. Reggie started, I think you talked about certification a little bit. We've created something called CBD Sure. So it is a certification program for clinicians and their staff. It's 45 minutes to an hour. that really gives each staff member an opportunity to understand first the endocannabinoid system,
That's right.
which is really, really important. And then how does CBD work in it, right? And what are all the things that it impacts? I don't know if you can see this, but that's a picture of the endocannabinoid system and all that. This is actually patient education material that goes with every order. You know, if somebody orders product, we send you all of this information to give to your patient. So it's not just about product for us, like Reggie said. But that CBD Sure is something that we've seen practices, they print out the certification. So you get this nice level setting of understanding of how it works, why it works, and how it works in the body. It helps connect the dots with those conversations. So now a patient's coming in the door, they may see CBD Sure certified by maybe somebody in the nursing staff. It may be the clinician themselves, that sort of thing. And so it connects those dots. It makes the conversation very easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Because remember, going back to what Reggie said, most patients have either already trying it, have tried, or have been curious about trying a CBD.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got all of that and you've got this massive momentum going on, if I'm a practice, I would be sure to have that conversation or create different digital assets, even in your practice or on social media. We've got great looking social media stuff that a lot of our practices are starting to implement. And it's actually causing conversations with patients coming into the office.
Yeah. That's a great description of the CBD Sure certification program. It's scalable. So we start off with a CBD 101 endocannabinoid system, what's important, why, all that, and we build on that. And Chad, you mentioned some of the digital assets that we have. So what comes with a product, it's a great product, right? And we've got the education element because we know that was a gap. The quality elements handled in the product. But then you also need to move product. Let's be honest. You do this every day with your practices as an advisor and a consultant, right? And so whenever we also sell in a product, it's a process. So we're turnkey in terms of our solutions. So we're going to help you customize marketing materials, digital assets, high resolution stuff that you can put your name on, or you can integrate it into what you already do. Because as you know, some aesthetic practices are awesome. They're their own powerful marketing team, right? And so sometimes we just hand it to them and get out of the way. But we also have educational videos.
Yeah.
So we like to consult, like as you do, with the practices around when it comes to our product, not the services. You're the pro there. But when it comes to our products, so what else can we surround it with to help you bridge that gap in education and also maximize your time as the surgeon who's in the OR?
Right. Well, look, here's what my clients are asking about. Kaeli, how do I make money in my sleep? Let's face it. It's an interesting industry. And I know I work with a business coach and she's always like, build this online thing and that. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. These guys are using their hands every day. These nurse injectors, these providers, they're the operators of their business. So having to build their business and run it at the same time, it's my obligation to bring to them new ways to differentiate their practice, to stand out in a crowded marketplace, elevate their visibility, build a business for themselves where they can leave a legacy, and they need to have a system in place. And that's really where, for me, the business side comes in. So I want to talk to you guys about something that I think this is probably the one thing that kind of was the tipping point for me with this, because I told you I was already into this wellness concept. I'm a big advocate. Anybody who knows me hears me talk about this a lot. That's why Brandon introduced us. I'm into the CBD. My dad was a professional football player and literally couldn't play his guitar, started getting on CBD, like taking it sublingually. But I mean, it's absolutely changed his life. So I've seen impact myself. But there's something that you guys have built in that I think is so unique. I think you call it a code. I'm not entirely sure. But for me, there's a lot of products out there. And you already answered a question I had, which was, what about these practices that go through the process of educating patients around CBD and then they're going to go buy it online? Well, we know that for them to get the cleanest, the highest, most clinically effective products, they should buy it from their provider, and they can't get it online. But what you guys have done from an innovative standpoint that is addressing really the way consumers buy today is that you've made it accessible for them online, and you've made it to a point where they can actually then not sell, but recommend and become ambassadors of their own doctors and of these products through this coach. So We talked about ways to leverage retail for patient loyalty, credential the practice as doctors addressing their patients' needs from a holistic standpoint, strengthening the bond and trust. So can you guys talk to me or tell really our listeners about what this thing is and how that works? It's just something that's so unique.
Sure. Yeah, maybe we both tackle this. Maybe I'll start with an element that as we did all our due diligence, whether it was aesthetic practices, plastic surgery, dermatology, and other specialties, there are a lot of little CBD companies out there that'll come in and say, hey, you want to retail our product? Well, and some have tried that, and maybe it's not the best quality stuff, but they've tried that. The other issue is typically those companies are also retailing it somewhere else, right? It's on a store shelf somewhere, or it's easily accessible on their website, or they put it on Amazon at X% less than what you would find it in a physician and or aesthetic practice, wherever that's at. And so we learned very early on. I mean, Reggie, we built our careers around how do we help support the healthcare provider? And so our whole strategy around MD Pharma is put the healthcare provider first and last, which means that we want your patients to order product from you and your practice. But if they want to continue getting it, and maybe they're not coming directly back into the practice, but they want it, we're going to provide every account a code, a patient access code. That patient access code is directly tied to that account, that practice. And so a patient can continue to come back. Let's say a patient travels miles and miles and miles because they've heard about this great aesthetic practice. You've done these procedures. They look great, but you never see them again because they live somewhere or they moved off. Well, guess what? They can still get access to your MD Pharma clinical CBD through you, through that code. And what we have also already found in 2 months, as we've launched this, in 2 months, what has happened with that code is, let's say it's a patient that has had a procedure, but then they're at home and somebody says, oh, you look great. First of all, they'll say, you look great. You look different. You look healthy. You look alive, you're alive, refreshed, whatever.
Did you go on vacation?
And they'll also say, tell me about that, whatever. And they may say, well, I've also been taking this clinical CBD.
Yeah.
And the patient goes, well, I don't necessarily need a procedure. It may be a whoever.
Yeah.
But they want it. And so what we have seen is that code kind of travels. One patient may turn into 3 or 4 patients in a way. So they may be referring for the clinical side, but also for the CBD side. And that new patient is using that code. It keeps the stickiness factor.
Totally.
We like to keep the stickiness.
Yeah, that's
loyalty.
You mentioned it earlier, Kaeli. We're going to totally take that. It's awesome. Make money in your sleep, right? So a patient can go online, use your practice's code. You may not see them again for a while. They may not come back to you for a wellness checkup that may be procedure related again. But in between then, when you ask them that question, what else did you notice? Did you like that? Great. Well, you can keep getting it. And so they enter a code that's specific to a provider. So when you start an account with us, it's not just any code. We'll customize a code for you. You can send that out. And what we're finding, we'll shut down if it goes on Amazon and somebody throws a code out there and it becomes something else. It's not going to happen. It's the same way that the referral process happens for an aesthetic provider. It's like, hey, tell me about what you did or what you like or who you go to. Oh, and by the way, they recommend this because, and our advisor team really helped us with that because they're like, if I believe in your product because it's not Wild West retail, then why would I want a friend of my patients or a family member of my patients to walk out into that Wild West?
Right. Well, and I can tell you, I can appreciate you guys coming from the big pharma side that you know how to put those regulatory pieces into play. So that's something I personally feel confident about for sure. So I kind of want to just open up for some final thoughts if there's anything else that you guys think you want to cover. And then I want to talk about how anybody who's listening to this, either live here or as a replay or next week when this podcast launches, how they can get product. And then I want to announce a special offer that you guys have made as far as training that they're going to be able to get with me if they do. I appreciate. Thank you guys for doing that. So yeah, any final thoughts that you want to leave for anybody thinking about bringing in a wellness division or CBD into their clinic?
Absolutely. I think, well, there's several things we could probably share. One of the things that we want to share, so we launched about 2 months ago with individual products. So
yeah, so if you know 1 in 7 Americans are taking CBD in some form or fashion, that's from Gallup, by the way, it's a recent poll, and you want them to take the best. So we invest in technology. This is nanotechnology in our soft gels. It becomes the daily vitamin is what the early feedback is from customers when they ask, what else did you notice? And this is an oral version, and this is another oral version. Some people are very familiar with this approach. It's the tincture that has just a clean dropper. And so we're very intentional, Kaeli, so you will appreciate this from a marketing perspective. So shocker, but spoiler alert, CBD breaks down in a bottle if it's open or it's exposed to UV light, like wine. Any what tie into wine I can make, I will. But if you put something in a tincture like this, most of retail has it in a clear or brown bottle that you can see right through. This is a glass bottle, and it's white, and it's not going to get penetrated by UV light, and it's going to stay good. It's going to stay consistent, the high quality that we expect of our products for 18 months. And so it's not going to last. It's not going to stay on shelves that long, right? Because our stuff does move, but it's a statement of quality. So if you've got nano gels that are absorbed at 50%, which is amazing, or you've got the absorption advantage, the immediate absorption of the tincture, it's a great oral option. And that's what led to the development and advisement of our kit being developed.
Yeah, so this was introduced here a couple of weeks ago. It actually has our nano soft gels, but also has our cream that's in a vacuum pump. And first class, this is a great kit that folks are using pre and post procedure, right? It's aesthetically pleasing. It looks great. It's kind of the iPhone experience when somebody opens it. Plus, it has education around the endocannabinoid system. And this is something that really has spurred some additional conversation for patients because they say, oh, wait, there's more utility.
So for those who are listening to this on podcast and not seeing visually, Chad is holding up a really beautiful pack. Their packaging is stunning. It's a really beautiful box that has a visual basically of kind of the sales materials that you'll see. And we'll link up in the show notes as well for you to go to the site to see it. And then within it, there's a topical cream and an oral supplement together in the kit. So sorry, Chad, I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Great point.
Yeah, and our clinicians and our medical advisory group and every specialty, they love the kit. They love the individual products. All of our stuff is packaged first class. So like Reggie said, we have spent more and invested more in our technology and our packaging to reflect how you would want your practice reflected. So we did it for that exact reason.
Yeah. So I guess a big takeaway, Kaeli, so no one else is doing what we're doing. And we do love that. That's part of our advantage, quality. When I say that, I mean, it's not just about the product. It is about the education. It's also about the help in your office to move it, right? That really sets us apart from somebody trying to sell into a practice with retail CBD, because as soon as they walk out, it's the skincare dilemma. It's everything else. They walk out, they Google it, and they'll undercut them with probably a product that's not accurately labeled.
Yeah. Right. I appreciate that. I think there are a lot of products out there. And I know that while my clients are thinking of ways to make money in their sleep, just putting more products on their shelf isn't going to do it. It's really about what kind of trust are they developing with their patients at the end of the day. You know, that's going to get their patients results, and that's going to really encourage them and incentivize them to want to refer their friends. And so I think you guys have really done a fantastic job. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that this is a unique opportunity now, particularly. I started in this business selling a non-hydroquinone-based skincare product when HQ was all the rage and everybody wanted it all. And it was available pharmaceutically, like docs could write scripts for it. But then we came out with this OTC, and then it was this interesting time where pharma was big on, and we kind of slipped under there. And so if you are a practice who's looking to, and it doesn't have to even be necessarily like buy CBD today, but if you haven't thought about incorporating a wellness component into your practice, really behind. And this is what is absolutely in today and going into 2021. And I'm getting ready to, by the way, on December 1st, take you guys through a 5-day free boot camp. So please Shan, if you could put the link in the show notes, we're going to talk about iconic influence. And that means differentiating your practice in a way that elevates you, makes you stand out from your competition and the sea of sameness. And so thank you, Chad and Reggie, for being here today and kind of helping deliver this message that I feel very passionately about. And I will tell you too, Chad and Reggie have agreed to sponsor a 30-minute call with me and a link to a training that we're doing inside our academy on creating unique proprietary bundled procedures, where I can take you through how to incorporate CBD into a full package going into holidays for your practice. So the things that we have to offer can be certainly complementary here, and time is of the essence. So with a purchase of your products in November, and I think I'll put it in here, just type in KLC and then you get access to those trainings and everything too. Anything else I missed, you guys?
I think you've pretty much covered it. We really appreciate the opportunity. It's such a unique space, but it won't be unique for very long. A lot of practices are picking this up, as you mentioned, very quickly, because it's another way to add value to the practice, both financially, but also the quality of your practice, right? And so when you're thinking about the value for the patient, you want them to walk in thinking, you know what, I'm getting a lot for my time here in that investment in their dollars. And so I think your practices that you consult with, I think they can find a lot of value bringing on an MD Pharma type partner. We look forward to, if there's orders in November, and we'll help support with a kit that we'll throw in with those orders to your practices and help support you in that way as well.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Well, I'll type all this up for you guys in the notes. I'm going to pull this over so you can see Ashley typed up for us. So visit mdpharma.com and list KLC. Get access to our creating bundles and proprietary offers training, plus a 30-minute discovery call with our team. So we can help you kind of figure out how to integrate this into your practice with the existing components that you have. Chad, Reggie, thank you so much for your time today. And
really enjoyed it.
To keeping a pulse on how MD Pharma does as you guys get bigger. So I appreciate this.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Kaeli.
Right,
yeah. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Fierce Factor. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you subscribe so you can automatically get new shows every week. I'd also love it if you left us a review. And come join the conversation online. If you're an aesthetic industry owner, operator, or leader, please join my free Facebook group, The Tribe of Fierce Aesthetic Leaders, a community of ambitious, purpose-driven professionals who collaborate and share best practices for growth in business and life. I'm honored you tuned in.